I'm Steph Garcia Cichosz with D1 Ticker, and I'm joined today by Jessie Gardner, Senior Associate AD for Leadership and Personal Brand Development at North Texas, to talk about year one of NIL and where we're going from here. Jessie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, I want to start by talking about your role and your title. What is a day in your life?
Oh, unpredictable. I think as far as my role at UNT, I'm not even a full year in yet, but really excited about where we're going with it. So really my role was hired to create more of a holistic development program for student athletes, which very much encompasses name, image, and likeness, hence part of the title of the personal brand development. And so for us, we recognize that NIL is so much more than just a deal in the 4 years while they're competing for an institution, but it is really about setting themselves up for life. And so a lot of what we're doing and trying to build out is focus on really helping our student athletes continue to prepare for what's to come beyond being at the mean green. And it really falls in line with our mission and our vision of building champions and preparing leaders.
Well, I have two follow-ups to that. One, you took this position at North Texas with the mean green before NIL was really a thing.
Yeah.
How has your daily priorities and time management shifted now that NIL is really in place?
Yeah, I think now it's more about just being even more intentional with what we're doing as far as our programming. So even through the summit, there's been a lot of conversation about the intentionality behind not only the content, but who you're putting in front of your student athletes, the type of engagement that you're providing them, the specific content that you're enlightening them on. So personal branding meant something different than it does now as far as education, but at the same time it also has some similar concepts as far as being able to, again, help build your brand for your future. Now from a standpoint of time management, I think the difference is we're not just having conversations now about resumes and cover letters and community service activities, but it's also about, I want to grow my social media, or I want to establish a deal with blank organization or company, right? And so trying to shift our advising as far as what that looks like. Of course, we work at UNT. We have an entire team of individuals who are helping really look out for our student athletes in this way. So from our platform and the disclosure aspects and our compliance department's involvement to our executive staff and what they're doing as far as being able to be intentional in conversations with different individuals and organizations and helping people understand what we're doing for our student athletes. I think all of that plays into it. But really, I think it hasn't changed our time as much as far as the busyness, because in college athletics we're never nonstop. But I would say it has changed our strategy and what we're talking about and how we're going about it.
Well, just following up on that really quickly, you have very extensive experience in student athlete development, leadership programming. How is NIL essentially just an offshoot of those kinds of original programming?
Yeah, I think it's about preparing people for their future. I mean, none of us could have predicted this. I was a former student athlete. I think back to when I played soccer at my alma mater and just trying to figure out what would I have done and what is the education I would have needed. And to be honest, at the age of 18 to 22, I would have had no idea. So I think for us, it's really about it really is an extension of what we're already doing. From a standpoint of our industry, student athlete development, we're really excited because we are just launched the white papers for how to standardize our industry, because there has kind of been all over what it looks like depending on campus, resources, et cetera. And while that's still going to be the case, there's an aspect of how do we look at it and say, what are we doing to truly develop our student athletes to be successful so that they leave the institution that they're at and they feel prepared to take that next step, because that's our responsibility and we want to make sure we're taking it seriously in how we are doing that. So NIL is a huge part of that, and at this point it's just become kind of the forefront of a lot of our focus, but I think that still plays into the career development, that still plays into building a reputation in your network, and that still plays into how you're being involved in the community and the leadership aspects of how do you lead yourself and how does that align with what you're trying to do as far as NIL and the brands that you represent.
Well, let's tap into those resources a little bit more. North Texas's program for NIL is called Paramount in partnership with Influencer. Tell me a little bit about the program and how it really leads into AD Baker's theme of building champions and preparing leaders?
Yeah, so the exciting part is that's a lot of where my position was hired for, is the education component, and so what that looks like. Now, from a standpoint of the entire program, of course, we have the platform that you mentioned with Influencer and what we're doing with them and how we can continue to strategize there. So getting more of our student athletes involved in Influencer, really utilizing it to the full extent that we can, looking for what those creative partnerships are that, again, here being at the summit and being exposed to a lot of different unique ways of thinking and what we can do forward. I think, as I've said to others, that NIL, it's like we're building a plane as we're flying it, right? And that's everybody on every campus. So as prepared as we think we are, you constantly are evolving, and so I think Paramount is the same way, right? We're going to constantly evolve that program to best suit our student athletes and be strategic in the way that we support them. And of course it's all about going back to the mission. What is it doing to help build champions and prepare leaders? So from the support, from the standpoint of like all the legal aspects of it and what we need to do, but the education to me, and of course, because this is the area that I really live in on a day-to-day basis, that to me is some of the most important components, because we need to have our student athletes equipped with the right knowledge and at least the ability to make the right decision, or make educated decisions, not necessarily the right decisions. We hope they will, but it's going to be up to them. We're not going to be in the room with them while they're making these decisions and identifying these deals. So what are we doing to make sure that they have the right information, that they feel educated and equipped to be able to problem solve and make those decisions? And, as some of the panels talked about, like even helping them think through how to say no if the deal isn't for them. And so really doing the alignment with their brand, understanding the financial aspects of deals and taxes and everything related, and even helping, figure out how to help our international student athletes navigate the space. So Paramount, we're excited about it, but I think, again, we're not even a full year in the launch of it, and so now we're at that point of saying, okay, where we stand with this and how do we continue to evolve it to really fit the way that NIL is evolving, based on our state legislation, based on what's going on across the country, and everything in between.
What has been some of that feedback from student athletes so far?
I think a lot of them think of NIL as, these six-figure deals, and if they're not really interested in that, they're like, I don't really mind. So for me, it's more about how do we creatively frame the education components to help them understand that this is life skills, right? So whether you're negotiating a contract for a deal or you're negotiating your future salary, whatever that is, those are components that are going to play into their future. And so I know when we did a program this past spring for personal branding, a lot of the feedback I heard as students were walking in, and again, I was brand new, so it was kind of, they don't have a relationship with me, they didn't know me quite yet, but a lot of them said, well, I'm not really interested in NIL, do I have to stay for this? But of course, at the end of the program, they're like, I understand, right? Like, I get it. The feedback on our surveys was really positive as far as being able to have, I had a colleague, and he's a great friend of mine, but Will Baggett came in and did his personal branding, and so being able to have him, somebody that I trust and I know is going to bring it and talk about NIL, but also make it a bigger picture item and help our student athletes see it that way. It's about reframing their perspective of what NIL is and how they can use it to their benefit, right? So I think it's just about reframing in the way it's all communicated.
What advice do you have for student athletes who, as you just mentioned, kind of walk in and say, I don't need a personal brand. What is this about? Who cares?
Yeah.
What's your advice for them about why they should think about branding themselves?
I guess I would want to help them think bigger, right? So what does this mean for you? And help them even just talking through, like, finding out what they're interested in and maybe what are some of the things that they're really passionate about. And then just talking through what examples of NIL would look like with that in mind. And I think a lot of times when you start to see that light bulb go off, it's when they start to make that connection and they realize, oh, this is interesting because in the future I want this, so what could I do now that would help prepare me to make those decisions or to have that knowledge base or whatever to make that happen. So I think when it comes to student athletes, it's going to be one-on-one, right? It's got to be no student athlete is the same in what they want to accomplish or how NIL looks to them. So I think those one-on-one conversations with myself, with other members of our athletic department. So again, making sure that kind of everybody is aware of what we have going on, how Paramount is continuing to evolve, and then helping support our student athletes in what it is that they want to reach, and just helping them see the bigger picture.
Well, from a resources standpoint, what can, group of 5 mid-major schools do to best allocate their resources so that, as you said, every student athlete is really served and getting the most out of NIL?
Yeah, it's going to be really different, I think, depending on where you are. So one of the unique aspects that I love about UNT is we are in the DFW Metroplex. How can we maximize and enhance what we're doing, utilizing our network of individuals and the growing, city of Frisco or Dallas, or even we've got a ton of alumni down in Houston. So recognizing that, Texas is just such a great location and we are right at the center of it. And so for us, I think it is about maximizing our resources, looking at our partnerships. I mean, we've got some great partnerships on campus and that we've been reaching out into and having collaborative conversations to help our student athletes in the areas of entrepreneurship, financial literacy. So there's just, I think, a ton around you, and it's easy for us to say, well, we need to bring in this person, we need to bring in that person, and again, budgets are different on every institution, so a Power 5 budget versus a mid-major budget is going to look different. So how do you get some of the same type of outcomes, but utilizing the resources that make sense for your institution, and whatever your institution's strategy. Ours is always going to go back to building champions and preparing leaders. So if whatever we put in place has to match that, because that is what we are about, and that's what we're going to push from start to finish. So our student athletes know that, our coaches know that, our staff know that, and so everything we do is really based on that foundation.
Love having a mantra to lead and guide. Well, as we kind of wrap up year 1, what have been some of the more innovative NIL deals or projects that student athletes have engaged in?
Yeah, I think it's been mostly passion-related stuff. So, our student athletes looking at something that they're really passionate about, and then helping them understand that, going and serving in the community in this way, that it doesn't have to be a money NIL deal, but what can you do to help support that and grow kind of the following behind what you try to do in the community. So, specifically, I think our student athletes have done some really unique and creative things. I think we have a lot of room to get more student athletes involved. And again, this summit has really helped me think through how can I better communicate that to our student athletes and help them see it differently, so that way we can continue to really advance what our student athletes are doing and really allow them to take advantage of this really unique time in their career.
Absolutely. Well, as we shift into year 2, there are a couple of hot topics right now that everyone's talking about. There is collectives, there's regulation, and then of course there's recruiting and the transfer portal. What's really on your mind these days, and what are you going to be paying attention to as we shift into this next phase of NIL?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to be, as an administrator, right, it's good to be aware of everything. You have to have some sort of a deeper understanding of what's going on and have a pulse on what we have going on in our industry. I think for me, and this just kind of sits at the core of who I am, is it's recruiting. I know how difficult it is for parents and loved ones to bring their young student, whether it's their first child, whether it's their only child, or it's the baby of the family, whatever it might be, is being able to bring them and drop them off and say, okay, now they're in your hands. So how do we help the parents of our student athletes feel supported in the fact that we are going to do what we can and what we're promising to do, which is building champions and preparing leaders. And what does that look like from the NIL space? So with that comes the understanding of collectives. The way our state legislation is, we can't have the involvement with that, of course. So we are being very diligent in making sure that there's a fine line right there, and there's nothing to be crossed.
Yep.
And following what we need to do from our compliance staff and everything that they're advising us to do. But so I think for me, where the bigger impact is recruiting, and just making sure that our parents of our student athletes, as well as our student athletes, a lot of them are asking questions, and they're asking great questions, which tells me that they're paying attention and they're staying informed. But I think what it comes down to is helping them understand, again, what NIL looks like for the Mean Green, and how it is more about their, the legacy of their life, not just the next 4 years, but the next 40 years.
Absolutely. Do you think in general that we need more outside entities and technology companies and solutions to help with NIL long term, or should it be more in-house for each athletic department to kind of take the reins?
Yeah, I see both. You can't deny, I guess, the advancement of our technology and everything that has continued to evolve. I mean, there's some really great organizations out there, but I think one of the things to recognize is that we just had a conversation in the last panel that no collective is the same, right? So they're not all created equal. And so really understanding, and I think that applies to everything, NIL is like really understanding what the resources are. No financial institution that says they're going to do education is created equal in the way that they're going to facilitate it, the way that they are going, the information they're going to bring, and even their motives behind it. So making sure that, again, you're, as an administrator, that we're doing our due diligence to identify what is going to be best fit for our student athletes, and really what's going to be in their best interests, as well as ours as an institution, and keeping with, again, what we are about, and how we continue to move forward in our mission.
Well, last question for you, Jessie. You mentioned earlier you were a soccer student athlete.
Yes.
NIL was not in place when you were competing. It wasn't in place when I was competing. But if it was, how do you think you'd be engaging with it?
Goodness. Well, I would like to think that I would be doing, phenomenal deals that help prepare me for my future. But I am confident, as much as I loved Lazy Moon Pizza in Orlando, Florida, that I would have tried to work out some deal with them to have pizza whenever I wanted. But at the same time, I think I would hope that I had some support in place, like we're doing with our student athletes at the Mean Green, to help think further and think deeper than just a slice of pizza.
I mean, I don't know. I think having a Jessie Gardner special pie would have been really fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, for giving us all of this fantastic insight, and we are very much looking forward to following along with how Mean Green athletes keep engaging with NIL as we go into year 2.
Awesome. Thank you.